In software, there's this idea of something called dog food, and it comes from this company that made dog food, and they said, we love our product so much, we eat it ourselves. And in software, the idea of dog fooding is that you're running the software yourself to figure out the bugs and the missing features. And luckily, I don't make dog food, I don't make accounting software, I make photography apps. Freeze frame, record scratch. Yep, that's me. I bet you're wondering how I got here.
We had a busy year. In summer, we won Apple's highest design award. Then we released a huge update for the latest iPhone. And now we're putting the finishing touches on our next big feature. It felt like a good time to put Halide through the paces. But how? I reached out to Rachel, my best friend of 20 years, and she suggested a trip to the Galapagos, a tiny chain of islands 563 miles off the coast of Ecuador. It's known for its animals found nowhere else in the world. Not only would this put Halide through the paces, it also asked a question. If you're going on a once-in-a-lifetime trip, do you really need to pack a big camera? Or can you get by with just an iPhone? Now, how do we get there? First, we pass through the capital of Ecuador, Quito. With over 2.8 million people, great food, and tons of history, it's a pretty cool spot to spend at least a few days. It also has a lot of stray dogs. While we were walking through the city, this guy started following us. Just remember, strays can carry disease. You should not pet them. But we washed our hands. From Quito, we hop on a short flight to San Cristobal, and then a bus ride to our boat. And that's how we got here. Now, getting from the boat to the island is a different matter, and the first example of where an iPhone beats out a big camera.
So they don't dock the boats on the islands. Instead, you travel from the boat through these rafts called Pangas. They can have a dry landing where there are usually some steps, and then there's a wet landing like here where they approach the beach and you get out into about calf-deep water.
If you're carrying around expensive camera gear, wet landings are stressful. One slip and a dunk could cost you thousands of dollars. And this is why I filmed everything on the Pangas using my iPhone while I kept my expensive camera gear inside waterproof bags.
Now, what's amazing is that each island has its own little ecosystem, and that's deliberate. They go to great lengths to make sure that you don't contaminate each island as you're traveling from one to the other. So when you get off the Panga and onto the ship, they'll spray down your feet so you don't accidentally track a seed from one island to the other.
And all of these precautions are worth it. These islands are gorgeous. But we didn't just come here for the views. We came to test whether the telephoto or zoom capabilities of your iPhone could stand in for the telephoto lens on a big camera.
Now, what better subject to use a zoom lens on than a wild animal? There's something majestic about watching turtles make love.
this would be the perfect test of a zoom lens, but I forgot one important detail about the Galapagos.
And that's the animals are completely unafraid of humans. All right, smile, babe.
On the uninhabited islands, you're only supposed to stay on the predefined trails. And you'd think that this reduces your chance of running into animals, but in practice, you have to look where you're stepping, otherwise you might just trip over them. It's even worse on the inhabited islands like Santa Cruz. Here, a fishmonger is swarmed by a flock of pelicans begging him for scraps. And then there are the sea lions. Now don't let those cute looks fool you. These guys are jerks. One sea lion tried to hitch a ride on one of our Pangas, and a member of the crew tried to shoo him off to no avail. Maybe he realized that no matter how hard you try, the sea lion always wins. Sea lions are the geese of the ocean. Now, some animals were shy, like these gorgeous flamingos who kept to the water. And this girl wasn't about to nest her eggs near a trail. The zoom also came in handy when our guides took us on these panga rides to the cliffsides that were inaccessible by foot. Now, what about underwater? For $50, you can buy an underwater case for your iPhone that's great for snorkeling. The same underwater housing for a real camera can cost you thousands of dollars. When it came to focal lengths, I never really switched away from the default wide-angle lens. And that's because underwater, everything is swimming, so everything is an action shot. And when you shoot with a telephoto lens, you're looking through tunnel vision. Often the best approach is to just capture a ton of photos and hope that a few came out well. A word of warning. ProRaw files push the limits of your iPhone, and sometimes it can't keep up. I'd tap the capture button, and then it would take a few seconds to actually capture the photo, and by that point, I'd missed the shot. This made it really hard to capture Galapagos penguins. They're chill on land, but underwater, they will zip by you like a bullet. It shouldn't come as a surprise, but my favorite shots came from the slower guys, like this marine iguana and this giant turtle. If you have a slow and friendly subject that'll let you get up close, does a telephoto lens serve any purpose?
So there's a couple of reasons that you'd want to shoot with a telephoto instead of a wide-angle lens. One, because you can't get close enough to the subject. And two, with wide-angle lenses, they tend to warp the features of your subject, whereas with a telephoto, it tends to be very flattering and realistic and better for portraits.
Here, it functions as a creative choice. Do I want a grounded, realistic turtle or a wacky one?
Can you believe that these guys hold up planet Earth?
When I reviewed my photos later, I spotted another issue with ProRaw. They were all a bit soft. What's going on?
So one challenge of shooting a telephoto image is that you need to capture it at a very fast shutter speed. And the reason for that is as you're trying to take a photo with your hand without a tripod, no matter how hard you try to keep your arm still, it's moving due to the little micro tremors in your arm. Now with a wide angle lens, you can't tell. But with a telephoto lens, as you're zooming in there, every little movement creates some motion blur. Now, one of the problems with shooting ProRAW is that you don't have full control over the shutter speed as it's capturing the images. It's actually taking a series of images at different shutter speeds and merging them together.
So what can you do to prevent this? Let's run some tests with this chart. We're going to pretend that we're on a rocky boat trying to snap some pictures. With the built-in camera, sometimes things are going to turn out fine, and sometimes things are going to turn out blurry. In Halide, when you enable manual exposure, we turn off deep fusion and smart HDR, and we honor whatever shutter speed you specify. Here, I set capture to 1/500th of a second. so no matter how much I move the camera, I get razor-sharp images. Manual shutter speeds work with ProRaw, but if you want the most detailed images, you should switch over to Native RAW or Bayer RAW. You can do this in settings, or you can long press on the Format button in the toolbar. Native RAWs give you full control over the detail versus noise reduction trade-off when processing an image. Now, developing a native RAW is an advanced topic, so we'll save that for another day. The results speak for themselves. The image on the left was captured on a rocky boat using all automatic settings with ProRaw, while the image on the right was captured with a native RAW, manually specifying a fast shutter speed. Now, I used an iPhone 14 Pro because it has a real telephoto camera. But what if you have a single camera iPhone? Can't you just recreate that telephoto look by blowing up your images in software afterwards? When you blow up an image, things get blurry and diagonal lines get pixelated. But we think that we can do a little bit better. So in the latest Halide update, we're excited to launch a feature we call Neural Telephoto. We apply the same machine learning model that we use on our macro mode to your telephoto images to create sharper details. Now, it's not going to match a real telephoto camera, but we think that the results are way better than what you get in most software.
So what did we learn from the trip?
Going back to the question of the trip, do you need to pack a big camera, or is the iPhone enough to cover everything? Well, over the course of a week, we captured over 2,000 photos, and there's really only one time that I missed my big camera and long telephoto lens. And that was when we were capturing those photos of the flamingos at a distance. But that doesn't mean that the big camera won, because there were also times where I was able to capture photos that were only possible on an iPhone, like when we went underwater. So if you want to capture every single possible photo, today you need to pack both a high-end camera and a high-end iPhone. And if you aren't willing to do that, because there is quality of life considerations, you have to keep these devices charged, you have to worry about them getting damaged. If you don't want to do that, then you just have to consider your trade-offs. Because there's a lot to be said about a device that just gets the job done and then it disappears. It's an amazing opportunity to live in the moment. And maybe that's the reason you're taking the whole trip to begin with. Thanks for watching. And now, a moment of Zen.